afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us as we explore an exciting new chapter in accelerating investment in Australia's life sciences sector. We're delighted to have you with us today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I'm joining you from the land of the Wurundjeri people, the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today from across the nation. MTPConnect is Australia's Life Sciences Innovation Accelerator. We're an independent, not-for-profit organisation established by the Australian government to drive innovation, commercialisation, and investment across the medical technologies, biotechnologies, and pharmaceutical sectors. We deliver innovation programs on behalf of both state and federal governments, support startups and researchers to develop medical innovations, foster global market connections, and help bring life-changing medical products to market. A key part of our work has been the creation and delivery of life science accelerator programs. To date, we've successfully run 6 accelerators for the MRFF, supporting a diverse range of companies through mentorship, capability building, and de-risking them for future investment readiness. These programs have helped unlock innovation, advance their innovations along the TRL, technology readiness scale, and prepare them for the next stage of growth. While many of the companies we support go on to raise further capital, we also recognize the significant challenge is the limited investment options available at critical stages of growth. This gap can hinder or delay progress, especially for companies developing medical products, which often face longer and more intricate commercialization pathways. To address this challenge, we're excited about our recently announced strategic partnership with Wholesale Investor. Together, we aim to bridge a critical funding gap by connecting the nation's life sciences innovators directly with Wholesale Investor's extensive network of over 45,000 high net worth family office and professional investors. The partnership addresses a well-defined challenge in the Australian market. While the nation produces world-class research and innovation, early stage and scaling companies often struggle to access the private capital required to navigate crucial phases of development for clinical trials and commercialization. This initiative will leverage MTPConnect's deep sector expertise and ecosystem network with Wholesale Investor's proven capital raising platform and investor network. We will work with Wholesale Investor to prepare both companies looking to fundraise and to help investors see the multiple benefits of investing in a healthier future, but may be unfamiliar with the more intricate commercialization journey for medical products. Today, you will hear more about the MTPConnect Investor Ready Program, which companies can get involved in. It culminates in the inaugural Life Sciences Investor Day at Wholesale Investor's annual Emergence 2026 conference in February next year, where participating companies will be able to pitch their product to investors and showcase their innovation in an exhibitor booth. But to tell you more, it is now my great pleasure to introduce Steve Torso to speak to you about the package in more detail. Steve is co-founder and managing director of Wholesale Investor, CapitalHQ, and Wholesale Investor Capital. Since launching in 2008, Steve has built Wholesale Investor into a leading global investment platform, showcasing private, PIO, and ASX-listed companies to over 45,000 high net worth and professional investors. He's widely regarded as an opinion leader in capital raising and has deep understanding of what it takes to connect innovation with investment. Steve, we're pleased to have you with us today. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Lisa, for the introduction. And for us, we're obviously super excited to be working with you, on this as an opportunity. And I'll give you a bit of a quick history, and then I'll show you a bit of a video so you can understand what we're talking about from an emergence perspective. What it actually looks like. But as Lisa mentioned, we launched in 2008, and our journey to start with, we had a simple idea where it was about sort of how can we aggregate sort of high net worth and family offices, and then provide sort of curated opportunities to those investors. And it started as a magazine. And some of you on this call may actually remember the magazine. And then sort of 2012, we then shifted to hosting sort of in-person activities. And at that time, what was unique for us is that we actually started building an ecosystem as part of it. And since then, we've been relentless in doing that. 2014, we actually started taking companies internationally. And so to date, I actually had to write them down so I didn't forget everyone. But basically, we've now done events across Australia, Singapore, UK, Malaysia, Dubai, Korea, London, obviously London I mentioned, and we're going to be doing our first one in India at the end of this year. And it's pretty, for me, it's really exciting to see how many of you are actually joining. We've now got sort of, over 100 people on this session, and we've had over sort of 210 register for it. So we are going to be, first things I'll mention is we are recording the session, and we'll be sending it out to everyone afterwards. And then likewise, so if you're watching this afterwards as well, we'll have the various links on this actual presentation, and then likewise you can sort of email following as well. So I'll get into the presentation that we're doing. Firstly, I'll go through a bit of an agenda.
Emergence was born out of the idea of actually placing a spotlight on the innovation ecosystem. Across the next 2 days, we'll have anywhere between 750 to 1,000 attendees, 50 to 60 companies that are going to be presenting their opportunities to you. We've got 40 keynotes and panelists throughout the next 2 days. We have absolutely stacked these 2 days to make sure you get as much value as possible.
I think this year kind of standing out from the scale, the audience, the speakers. I'm quite surprised by the breadth of types of companies and investors that have come on.
I've met a number of people already. It's certainly a good turnout.
The vibe is good and the setup is great. I was really very, very impressed with what I saw the minute I walked in.
We have absolutely stacked these 2 days to make sure you get as much value as possible. You're going to get access and you're going to see some incredible presentations from some amazing CEOs, fund managers, and founders behind the business that are presenting.
Emergence, how they developed in the last 7-8 years. It's kind of represents, the current local ecosystem, investment community. I think that's very important. It's great event.
Well, it's the first time I've come to this conference. I have to be honest, I didn't really know what to expect. So it's quite a unique event in that sense that it's catering for, the really, really long-term investors, the really short-term kind of crypto investors, or even the high-risk investors like people that want to invest in startups.
Steve and the team always put on a really eclectic mix of businesses and investment options for wholesale investors in market. So it's been a positive one thus far.
This is the first time I've been at an Emergence conference. A lot of people who are inquisitive, which is great. So I've had a number of discussions, and the quality of these discussions is sort of borne out by the follow-ups. That a lot of people take my details, and I've taken details of a lot of people. The app's been helpful for that.
We want you to walk away from this event with 3 outcomes. We want you to basically experience high-value networking. We want it to help shape your own investment thesis about how you're thinking about markets and your own investing, and then getting access to opportunities that you don't normally get access to in the normal day-to-day.
The minute I walked in, the registration was painless, the way the event was laid out, the exhibitions, the demos, and not to mention the great coffee, the great food. So I had a great time, and the panel was exceptional. It was a great time of sharing, and I hope everyone benefited from the panel.
Thank you, the Wholesale Investor family, for everything they've done to give us this opportunity. You've done a great job.
We've done everything to make sure it's a seamless experience for you. The final point from me is this, and I say this every single year, and it happens every single year. The power of one conversation in Emergence is absolutely everything. You will meet someone here today that will be an important relationship for you in 5 years' time, and you would have absolutely forgotten that you met them here, but don't worry, I will remind you.
All right, so that gives a bit of an insight as far as, what this culminates in as we're sort of talking about from a presentation perspective. So aspects we're going to cover today on the presentation is obviously I'm going to be talking about the sort of current fundraising landscape. And we're talking about the sort of differentiation in when raising from capital from high net worths and family office investors. Obviously, we're talking about the partnership program between us and MTPConnect, which I'm really excited about. And just to give you context, I become passionate about life sciences in 2009, and it was a company called Curation, which changed, basically, it changed my life in many different ways. And it sort of roped me into this whole area. And since that time, we've worked with some incredible companies, which I'll share as part of this. Then I'll be giving a short demonstration on CapitalHQ. And then we'll be talking about the special offer that we have for life science companies as part of the day one that we're going to be hosting with Emergence. And you got a bit of a visual of what Emergence looks like from that. In fact, that's the exact venue that we're going to be hosting it. And then I'll be talking about how you can participate as a company, and then the next steps associated with that. So first one is just the life science sort of paradox at the moment in Australia. And that is, we're so regarded, as far as having top tier research globally. Obviously, we're regarded for the innovation and for producing world-class IP. The challenge is that, accessing capital is very difficult in Australia, with really only a handful of, sort of local VCs. And then obviously there's just this funding gap that's ongoing and consistent. And it's sort of proof by, like today, like just so you know, like there's the people sort of coming on now has gone up even more than what I mentioned beforehand. And it just shows you that, that this raising capital aspect it's not just a frustration for you, it's a frustration for everyone in the ecosystem. And, it's something that we just think about relentlessly as a company. So to go through a bit of the history of life science capital raising in Australia, when I joined this space, pretty much the path that people would go down was that you would actually raise capital from high net worth and family offices for the early stages. And then, obviously you would leverage that as much as possible through the R&D grants, commercialization grants, etc. But typically what a lot of companies would do is they would go and list on the ASX, and they would utilize that as listed venture capital. And then from there, then they would go and look to raise as much capital sort of overseas as possible once being, listed on the Australian market. 2022, 2023, the ASX started changing their criteria and tightening that. And so that meant that it became a lot more challenging for life science, especially at the earlier stages, to actually go and list on the ASX and utilize it as that funding mechanism that people were beforehand. Now to basically, fill in that gap, then obviously a lot of government grants and a lot of government programs and so forth. And I'm pretty sure every single person that's on this session today has received some type of government funding in some way, whether it be through R&D, grant schemes, and obviously, MTPConnect's one of those, important schemes that are part of it. And for me, and then obviously there was a whole bunch of different sort of R&D financing solutions that all come up. And those have been absolutely invaluable. And it's probably one of my biggest observations in the last 2 years in talking to life science companies is that the majority of people have raised so much capital, through these different, schemes. And I suppose it was sort of last year, late last year, it sort of become really apparent to me from conversations that I was having that, when you look at, all the different state and federal governments, every single one of them have budget pressures in different ways. So then I had concerns about, what could potentially happen to a lot of this funding that was coming down the pipelines, at the moment. And that's when I wanted to be a lot more active, in actually helping sort of technical and life science businesses access capital. So high level, why basically, and so that's on the stressful part. On the bullish part, I'm absolutely more bullish about life science than ever. And AI is the first component of that, because AI changes everything in so many different ways. I've experienced it in my own business. If you've come across, Wholesale Investor before, if you've come across some of my keynotes, my presentations, I talk about it a lot. And, if you look at all these different points that I've highlighted in this, it really does change the game for what's possible for a lot of companies. So, in noting that, the capital required to go through the various stages, is going to be less going forward. Likewise, whether it be, and that's obviously on the sort of on the drug discovery side, on the medical device, likewise, the ability for rapid prototyping also reduces development costs and also timelines. Then the factor which sort of no one really expected at the start of this year was with the new FDA sort of leadership, basically, creating reforms to help speed up clinical trials. And, it sort of covers that. But, these points become really, really important. So small teams can now significantly achieve more. And one of the big concerns for investors is just the sheer amount of capital often required to go through the various stages. Well, the great news for you, is that, it is going to be less going forward than what it was previously. So for me, and I've been communicating this before this partnership, I've actually been communicating this to our investor base, is that I think that this next period for life science companies represents one of the greatest opportunities for investors and also founders. And the reality is life science is probably one of the most mispriced sort of areas in sort of capital markets where, you know, the valuations of many companies should be a lot higher than what they are. So what I'll do now is I'll just go through the founder's reality and then also sort of my philosophy. So for me, we've often surveyed the companies that we work with, and we know that, you know, basically the struggle to access investors is just ripe, you know, across the whole ecosystem. You know, 54% of companies mentioned it. There's obviously a significant amount of time lost in the capital raising process. And then the final part is that fundraising is a significant distraction. And, you know, I know many of you as sort of CEOs and sort of founders, or, you know, however you're sort of involved in the companies, I know that often you can be spending anywhere between sort of 25 to 50% of your time thinking about or proactively engaged in fundraising in some way, shape, or form. You know, and the last point I make with this, you know, I can count on one hand how many people actually enjoy the capital raising process. The truth is everyone hates it. You know, no one enjoys, because it's pretty much it's a process, and it's a terrible analogy, but it's the best one for it. It's like going through a dating process, putting your profile up, and then out of 100 people, having 98 coming back and tell you why they're ugly or ghost you. You know, it's just a really frustrating process to go through. So the real challenge that when it comes for, and as I said, I've worked with a lot of technical businesses, the real challenge is that when founders sort of go beyond their own networks, and typically a certain amount of capital can be raised from networks, etc., right? But when you move outside of that network, it becomes very different. It's not about the sort of single transaction. It's not about sending out more pitch decks to more investors and then hoping for an investment. There's really a process of building trust and building sustained engagement with those investors, especially in the life science area, because effectively, you know, it takes years to go through all the various different processes you do. And, you know, often you're attracting patient capital. You know, so one of the biggest things I've always sort of noted that with investors, and I was having conversations, is that effectively they want to fund solutions which they understand personally. And often that means that they've experienced the problems which you're looking to solve, right? So they invest in the human story behind the technology. So if it's a cancer-related drug, you know, typically a lot of people have had family members, or they've experienced cancer themselves, etc. You know, so it's one of the great challenges. So it's really, you know, one of the things to sort of clearly educate, a single pitch rarely works. The narrative needs to unfold over time, and also likewise that top of mind and that engagement aspect. And then the next part is that we really encourage, you know, life science companies that when you're sort of presenting, often less science, more human is a really important approach. And I know that can be difficult because effectively what you're passionate about or what you're excited about is the technology that you're working on, right? Effectively what they want to understand is what is the end outcome that it could potentially benefit, right? And this is when you're dealing with high net worth and family offices. When you sort of move to institutional invest, that's a very different story, right? But on the family office and on the high net worth side, this is the part that they are trying to understand and they're trying to connect with. And the last point I'll make on this is that if you get to the point where you're saying, if they don't understand the science, I'm not going to explain it to them, that's pretty much the point where you've lost, you know, that investor, or you've lost the investors that you're dealing with on, you know, specifically on the high net worth and on the family office side. But there's absolutely ways that you can counter that in going through the process. So what is actual capital raising? The reality is, and you know, I said most scientists and most technical people don't like to hear this, but the reality is it is just a marketing and sales process, right? The marketing process is building that pipeline of potential investors, and then the sales process is converting those potential investors into actual investors. And the product that you're selling is your business, your innovation, your discovery, your technology, etc. That is effectively what you're selling to them, right? So understand that is pretty much what it is. And if you think about that, it reframes the way in which you think about capital raising. And so when just so you know, and I'll tell you about my own journey. When I understood this, because my background was marketing before sort of getting into capital raising, innovation, etc., everything made sense to me. It understood about the nurture process. It understood about getting top of mind awareness with potential investors. And I know most people sit there and think, well, I just want to get on with the science of it. The reality is the funding is required, for getting on with that science part. So we developed sort of 4 core principles for the capital raising process, which actually pretty much went against the grain of what most people sort of advise. What most people will advise is, you do your capital raising, raise enough for 2 years, and then go do your capital raising again. But if you actually look at some of the biggest success stories, like Airwallex, like Canva, like any life science company, really, you can name every single life science company. I can tell you that, especially the listed ones, the CEOs are endlessly in capital raising mode. So the core principles that we built around was get ready, stay ready, always be engaging, always be raising and engaging. And that doesn't mean you always need to be taking in capital. It just means that you're always engaging with potential investors for your business. And in markets terms, they have the conversation around doing deal roadshows or non-deal roadshows. Deal roadshow means that you're raising money. Non-deal roadshow means that you're basically preparing for a capital raise. And the first point, that get ready point, it's one thing I just hammer home, because I know for my own journey, I had Investec, who's now a shareholder, but when they knocked on the door to potentially invest into our company, I wasn't ready at all. I basically had to hold them off for 2 months while I actually got myself ready to go through the capital raising process. So the solution system that we sort of introduced to MTP, and that we work with, many companies, across Australia and obviously across the globe, is a combination, and it's obviously done in partnership between the 2 of us. And the idea that we had was really, really simple. We do a lot of events and conferences and so forth, but the most important thing I wanted to highlight was I wanted to put on something which we could place a massive spotlight on the life science ecosystem. Because my feeling is there's a lot of success stories that investors are unaware about, and there's a lot of great innovation companies that also investors would want to meet. They just don't have the pathway to actually connect with them. So this is where it became important for us. And this partnership really is with a purpose, in the sense that, obviously MTPConnect, everything they do is focused on advancing medical technologies, biotech, and then pharma across Australia. For us, our mission at the core of everything we do is about empowering innovation, capital, and ambition. And we do that in the network we've built of 45,000. We've done that over 16 years. And it's so hard to replicate, because we've just done it through sheer grind and just relentless activity in the space. But together, everything we're thinking about is how we can help bridge the life science funding gap. So, and this is obviously the comment which Stuart made in the release that we put out, is that the mission from MTP is to foster the growth and global competitiveness of Australia's vibrant life science sector, and access to capital is critical to this mission. And I think they do an incredible job with the delegations that not only bring out to Australia, but also the ones like they're doing to Saudi, ones like they're doing to the US, etc. Like, they're really in an incredible position and done an incredible amount of work sort of, to help facilitate that. So we've got a 4-step solution, which with the way we think about capital engagement. And I mentioned that instead of capital raising, right? And the reason is because effectively, when we're sort of working with a company, we explain it as the 4 Ps. And the 4 Ps is, the first stage is profiling. And that phase is really going from unknown to known, right? And like with if you think about any product that you buy or any service that you buy from anything, the journey for a decision is, first you become aware about something, then you consider it, and then you make a decision on it. The challenge with capital raising is most people think it goes from, you heard about me, now I want you to make a decision on me, right? They forget that consideration part. So we do a lot of work on the profiling aspects, and I'll cover that sort of down the presentation. Then obviously promotion, and the purpose of the promotion part is to obviously generate interest, from potential investors. Then presentation, which, I'll cover what we're going to be doing at the Life Science Investor Day for our Emergence conference, but the ability to present directly to investors, directly to deal makers, and, and people that can actually either invest into the company or be proactively supporting in various different ways. And then obviously publishing a milestones and announcement. Now, the last one's the most important one, and it's often the ones that people spend the least amount of time on. Well, the reality is when you're raising is that there's more people following and observing what you're doing that are not talking to you than what are actually communicating to you. And it's how do you consistently engage them or bring them to the actual table. In fact, the way I explain it is you have two types of investors. You have ones that are active, where they're basically actively asking you questions. They're the ones reaching out to you, etc. And then you have the passively engaged ones, where they're just stalking you from afar and effectively they're waiting for triggers to engage. So the why behind our CapitalHQ software. So in 2019, 2020, in 2018, we did 48 showcase events across 7 different countries. I almost killed myself that year being on that sort of schedule. But I sort of sat there and thought there just must be a better way from the engagement perspective, right? Because I just realized everyone was just sending out pitch decks. But I realized from my own experience that, that wasn't my experience. The people that were looking to invest into my company had been following me for some time, or they'd be engaging with me, or they were basically just observing what we were doing. So the reality is, and the other thing is that when I went to go through my own capital raise, and this is sort of 2019, I understand the frustrations of it. I understand the emotions of it. Like when you have the emotion of when you have an investor say that they're going to participate, you feel like you're bulletproof. When you get another rejection, you want the world to swallow you. It's really such an emotional roller coaster that you go through. And in my own journey, I had, a shareholder say to me that they were going to basically raise me $1 million and then raise me $5 million. And effectively after 6 months, they'd basically raised 100K. And this was in the time that I meant to be raised 6 million. They'd raised 100K and I was in a massive pressure sort of situation. So I thought there must be a better way. So there was 2 lessons I got from that. Number one is I'm going to take control of the capital raising process myself, right? And number 2 is I'm going to focus on the science and the process of capital raising. And I was just very fortunate enough to be surrounded by, corporate finance guys, investment bankers, etc. Because from a media perspective, everyone just talks to you about getting investor ready, getting your deck ready, and then sending out, and then how to pitch to investors. Very few people ever talk to you about the actual engagement process, sort of following up from that. So basically, not only did I want to educate on it, which, we've got a lot of content on it, but then also I wanted to build software to actually facilitate that process. So we built CapitalHQ, and it was designed and basically ended up becoming my sort of little command center, or my sort of source of truth for my capital raising. And in that, we enable investor access, right? And we've also invested into AI from a matchmaking perspective. So investors see the most relevant deals for them, and then companies see the most relevant investors for them. Now, of course, investors are never going to be as proactive as what you are as far as hunting down deals. They expect it to effectively be referred to them, come into their inbox, etc., or be presented in some way. So by providing the investor access, we're always encouraging companies to, reach out to our network, but to also then add them on LinkedIn so that people can passively stalk you. Then we focused on the streamlining process, right? Because we thought if you can help simplify the experience for investors in how they engage with your company, it also helps you simplify your own capital raising process. So in my own journey, I found that I went from speaking to investors for 4 to 6 hours for each investor down to 30 minutes to an hour. The interesting thing was that time that they spent, that additional time, they actually spent that engagement inside my deal room, going through my deal room, going through my documents, going through my frequently asked questions, going through my news updates, going through my investor relations communications, etc. It ended up saving me, that initial sort of preparation part ended up saving me a whole bunch of time in the back end, and obviously facilitating the capital raising. And then the last part was I wanted to actually see what they were doing. I wanted to feel the engagement of what investors are doing in my room. And it's funny enough, we've actually got a scoring system inside of our platform. And out of my top 15 scoring people in my deal room, 14 have become shareholders, right? So the idea was to build software that becomes the toolkit that you can utilize with companies and engage them with your opportunity over time, but ultimately facilitate the sort of, you know, end-to-end process of the actual capital raising. So I'll just give you a short demo. All right, so that gives you a bit of a high level of what the actual software looks like. And obviously I do have a longer version of that where I actually show a live demonstration of my real deal room to show you how I've actually run my processes. And just, you know, I know for a lot of life science companies, they sort of have that sort of underlying thing, oh, but we're different because we're in XYZ area. For us, we've worked with hundreds of life science companies over the last sort of 16 years across all various areas, whether it be medical device, whether it be life science, pharma, health tech, you name it, and obviously agri-tech as well. So, you know, for us, it's not an unusual space, which is why, you know, so this is such an important opportunity for us. And to give you an example, like 4DX, you know, I was so excited to discover that they'd actually achieved unicorn status because we actually did some work with them right in the early days. Just as that actually spun out of, I think it was Monash, they'd spun out, they were raising their sort of seed capital round. And I'll show you a sort of an announcement that we did for them sort of early on. But, you know, we did some of their early capital raising with them. So to see them we've now had 12 companies that have gone on to become unicorns. You know, Qbiotics on there. Qbiotics is that story is very close to my heart. I'm still very close to Victoria today. You know, when we raised with them, effectively, they had sold pretty much everything. And, you know, one of their shareholders actually put up some money to actually, you know, utilize sort of what we were doing. And that $2 million they got at that time was the most important money. This was back in 2009, to give you an idea. And now they've obviously raised a ton of money, and they're sort of now preparing their phases to go to go on the ASX. You know, Immugene's another one that, you know, that's close to me. Leslie, you know, just watching them go through their ride when she joined at sort of 20 million market cap, and then, you know, obviously they went sort of past the $1 billion mark, and it's obviously come back well off that sort of in the last sort of 12 months or so. But, you know, there's plenty of examples of, you know, of companies that we've worked with that have, you know, Novapep's another one that we've raised capital for, you know, right in the sort of earlier stages. So, you know, for me, and I was just trying to find, there's one other one I wanted to mention. PYC, you know, another perfect example of someone that we worked with when they're a 20 and 30 mil market cap. And I've also seen, we had a recent example as well where there was a heart-related company where, and this is the weird thing about this space, it's Cardiobionics. Anyway, they presented at one of our events. They actually met one of my shareholders there, and one of my shareholders is a family office, but he's also an advisor as well. And then he facilitated them, you know, basically going and raising a significant amount of money. Telix, we worked with, you know, once again, very early on, well before they were a unicorn. So there's plenty of examples said across the life science space, across all areas that we've actually worked with. And Opal, Julie Phillips, is also one of my favorite humans. I went to one of her investor lunches one time because I was a small shareholder in the company. And effectively, I turned up and I was very surprised to see that I absolutely knew everyone in there, and they were our attendees. So, you know, lots of different examples across who we've actually worked with. So in this video, I just want to show you basically, because obviously I'm just sort of talking about what we do, but I want you to hear it from our clients, you know, as far as their journey, as far as working with us.
All of this year has been full-time fundraising for me. It definitely takes a lot more time than I thought it would. I think the main hurdle is finding the right profile of investor for our opportunity.
How many conversations you had before getting your first investment?
Around 250.
During your race, you have to be confident that you keep that momentum going.
It's very difficult when you're trying to build a company and trying to cap raise at the same time.
The hardest thing in founding a business is raising the capital. For a business like ours, you know, capital is oxygen. I think any founder needs to be prepared to grind. It's not an easy job.
Will we still be alive when we do finally get an investor?
How to sort the people who are really intending to invest from the people who are just kicking tires.
If you launch a cap raise and you're not prepared, then it will take you much longer, but you'll also turn off a lot of investors along the way.
We really use the platform a lot to screen people and to help us to find the investors that could make a real difference for us.
It mitigated a lot of time investment, allowed us to focus a lot on the business, and we had a great team behind us helping us.
You're a platform, an ecosystem, an integrated network we all know enables to speak to so many people around the world that we would not be able to do otherwise.
Gave us, I suppose, that discipline of the getting the information out there. So, you know, really good categories, that centralized platform that we could keep on top of all our documents. It also gave the potential investors the ability to look at, you know, the information in their own time. Having one source of truth for information for investors, you could see who had looked at your platform. It sort of prompted you to follow up.
So we've only been with Wholesale Investor about 6 months now. We've raised $3 million through the platform.
We use Wholesale Investor's platform to raise our seed round. We raised about $1.3 million.
In fact, our US JV partner came indirectly through Wholesale Investor. We've raised somewhere between 20 to 30 million.
We just signed an agreement about a month ago for a $7.5 million project in Queensland.
One actually came through Wholesale Investor, was an introduction, and they're coming on board, and they're rolling out hundreds of sites that will have solar and battery.
Fantastic. We've raised $3.5 million in equity to be able to build the foundations in the organisation.
As of the 1st of December, I'm now contracted as the Managing Director of an ASX listed company.
I feel really lucky because I think Wholesale Investor for me has listened. They've not only listened, but they've delivered and brought not only investment partners, but actually has the ability to be seen and you have extra exposure.
We came seeking finance, but we're going to leave probably doubling or tripling the size of our app by incorporating other people's tech and other ideas and things and collaborating together, which is something we were not expecting.
Did the seed raise on the Wholesale Investor platform to start our global expansion. And we'll be back to Wholesale Investor to raise our next round on theirs.
So it's not just about investment. This platform has just opened up such a massive amount of global opportunity for Rex Energy.
So I hope that gives you a bit of perspective as far as from their perspective. Now, what I'm going to do is just take you through some of the elements that we have as actually part of the program. And as I mentioned, part of what we do is part of that profiling part of going from unknown to known. But it's also important for people to hear it in your voice. Now, I just see people asking sort of questions. So what I'll do is I'll do questions at the end and I'll go through all of them. All right. So basically one of the first parts, we actually do a professionally produced CEO interview, right? So it's your opportunity to talk about the history of the business, your discovery, technical breakthrough, etc., and obviously the potential opportunity for that. That's the first part. And typically what we then do is when we produce it, we then encourage you to put it in your deal room. So it's one of the first parts that people see when they come in. And then also we do an article on your business. This is one, I didn't mention it, but this is one that we've just done with EBR earlier this year. Now, obviously we've been working with EBR for now 3 years almost. And obviously they've had a great trajectory as they've gone through their sort of various stages of approval, and now they're sort of at a pretty cool stage. So then we do an article, and then one of the key parts is I'm also going to be doing a capital raising masterclass. So as I said, I spent a lot of time, basically figuring out what is the science and process of actually running a capital raising process. And then also the typical pitfalls that I've seen. I said I've worked with many founders, and I've watched many different capital raises. So, I really wanted to go through that. And then the culmination of this, this is the one of the most important parts, is that we're going to be dedicating the entire day to life sciences, and effectively it's going to be on February 18th. It'll be at the Four Seasons Hotel. We expect anywhere between sort of 500 to 750 investors on that day for the event. And then because we've built our own software, we actually provide access to the investors inside the software. So you can actually reach out to them, connect with them, invite them to come and have a chat with you. And then obviously there's matchmaking, etc., inside the software sort of post the event as well. But on the stage, you get an 8-minute presentation. You also get a dedicated trade stand, so investors can come and have a chat to you. And then we also record your presentation, and we'll also be live streaming the day as well, right? So we find that, and this is the only conference that we actually live stream, and it's just because it's the biggest one that we do each year. For whatever reason, it's the one event that we do that's taken on a life of its own. And we also even have international investors that fly in for this event, which is super exciting. And then post the event, from a momentum perspective, we obviously continue to provide promotion, visibility, etc., to our network. We'll be doing an online investor showcase, and also providing and then giving you opportunity to provide investor updates on your significant announcements. And then there's also other opportunities. If you want to do additional stuff with us, there's also other stuff you can do, because we are going to be doing a version of Emergence in Singapore. We'll also be doing it in Dubai. And then also probably likely with our new partner, we'll also be doing a version in India as well. So the idea is that it's not just about this presentation. The idea is it's all about, as I said before, the profiling leading up to it, the promotion beforehand, the presentation part, because you just can't beat the in-person aspect of looking in someone's eyes, having a conversation, understanding a deal. And then also we highlight that often what comes from this is not just the investment side, but also potential strategic and commercial opportunities as well. So as mentioned, heard Trevor sort of talking before about what he did with us. Cubiotics, they've raised a ton of money. This was at the stage they just raised $10 million. They've obviously gone on to raise a lot more. We've also been facilitating secondary sales for them, and they're about to go through their sort of next phase in sort of moving towards IPO. And I found this, I dug this out of the archives, but this was an example of 4DX. This was, I remember I was speaking to them just before they were about to IPO. And they mentioned that the money that they got, during this period was some of the most important capital they got. Because when they actually went to IPO, they had various fund managers offering, $5 million, $10 million sort of check sizes, etc. But at the early stages, this was the hardest capital to get. So this was them when they raised sort of 4.5, in total from our network. So other examples, I said I mentioned plenty of them, but really I just want to highlight that there's the power of sort of structured visibility and also engagement in the actual process. So key thing is, I'll just go through the partnership and the program. What it actually encompasses is that as part of participating in this, companies will have, and this is unique for us, they'll actually get lifetime access to CapitalHQ. So the software that I showed you can become your sort of capital raising source of truth for going forward. There's all various ways that you can use it for. You can use it for you can create multiple rooms. You can use it for high level rooms. You can use it you can have a separate DD room. People use it for board meetings. People use it for finance applications, etc. Just because it's a simple folder structure that basically allows for centralization of information and easy access for the different parties you're dealing with. And likewise, it's easy to switch on and switch off access, if people are no longer relevant. It includes the capital raising masterclass that we'll be doing. It also includes a feature in an online investor showcase that we'll be doing in the lead up to Emergence. Then, of course, there's the actual feature itself at Emergence 2026 on February 18th at the Four Seasons. And then also we'll be doing a professionally produced CEO interview plus an article feature on your business as well. And you saw what we did for EBR. And then following in the following 12 months, will be if you have any significant news announcements, come through in that time, we will be distributing and publishing those announcements as part of our weekly newsletter going forward. And the entire structure is really designed around engagement and multiple touch points. And this is just the parts that we're going to be providing. Obviously, MTP are also going to be supporting in their ways as well, as far as, on the investor readiness side, preparation, presentation. We'll also be supplying templates that you can utilize as part of the process as well, and also facilitate with the onboarding of setting up your actual deal room. So the actual special price we've put together, for this is $9,750 plus GST. And as mentioned, that includes the lifetime access. Now, the reality is because we can only sort of concentrate one full day to Life Sciences, it's actually limited to the first 20 companies that are looking to participate as part of it. And, as I said, everything with that $9,750, there's no other fees attached to it. There's no transaction fees, there's no success fees, nothing. That's just a one-off fee for the subscription, and that covers all those various elements. So the key point I'm going to highlight is that obviously capital raising has no guarantees, and it's just an impossible thing to do that. So capital raising is a very complex thing. The parts that we can control is obviously we can provide access to the investors, we can provide the opportunities on the day, the way in which the professional way in which you present yourself, provide suggestions on how to actually engage investors, etc. And then obviously the ongoing platform access. The part you control is obviously the quality of the opportunity, the strength of your team, because that is, I know people talk about investment highlights, but really it's just social proof elements related to capital raising, market timing, and also the follow through on investor interest and the actual process you run. Like in pragmatic parts, we do a hell of a lot of work just to create an introduction. Pretty much after that, it's over to you. Right, so we do our best from providing support, providing the tools, etc., to assist. But ultimately, it's going to be reliant on how you communicate your opportunities to investors. Of course, we're going to be running a masterclass to assist with that, and likewise, MTPConnect will be supporting in that as well. So, if you want to learn more about it, so sure, they're going to be providing a QR code link so you can register your interest. Effectively, the next step after that is you'll have a conversation with either myself or the MTPConnect team about it, where you have the opportunity to sort of ask any questions that you have, etc., about the program. And then if approved, because it is also a curation process from both sides, if approved, then of course we go through the onboarding process. So my team will actually assist you in the actual setting up of your deal room. And then also we'll go through the process of engaging for starting the process of the CEO interviews, etc. Now, as mentioned, we're limited to 20 just because of the structure of a day in a conference, because we do have to cater for keynote presentations, panel sessions, etc. So effectively, it's limited to 20 places for that day. If you're an Australian or New Zealand-based company, I just saw someone mention about US participation. If you're an Australian or New Zealand-based company, we do have a third-party provider which can assist with payment plan options, right? So effectively, it's like a buy now, pay later, but for businesses that you can utilize. So it just assists in spreading those payments across 4 or 6 months. One of the requirements is you do have to have been an existing business for longer than 12 months. And I assume if you're on this session, then that would sort of, that's part of the sort of criteria. If you've received funding, it's also part of the criteria. So basically, as a recap of what you receive lifetime access to CapitalHQ. Now, just so you know, for CapitalHQ as a standalone, we actually charge $5,000 per year normally for access of what you'll get lifetime access to. So for the lifetime access of your business, you can utilize that for all your capital raisings going forward. And the reality is, I haven't met a life science company that's not in cap. It's very actually, I've never met a life science company that doesn't have a need for raising capital. So, you know, effectively the executive interview, video production, the online showcase, and email, social media promotions. As I mentioned, in the lead up to Emergence, we'll also be doing an online showcase and an investor education session. Your dedicated investor booth on the day, your main stage presentation, which is an 8-minute presentation, and then obviously the capital raising masterclass that we'll be hosting as well. So the activity timelines, just to give you a bit of an idea. So over the next few weeks, we want to be having conversations with you and going through basically the curation process and answering any questions you have about it. On November 1st, we're basically going to start the scheduling process for the CEO interviews, right? Because the biggest thing that I really highlighted to the MTP team, that I wanted to do as part of this was, typically what happens with us is often, people will come to us sort of, a week out from an event and say, oh, hey, I want to get involved. And I said, what's most important for me with this is I want to spend a lot of lead up time actually doing promotions on the companies participating, so that by the time we get to the event, effectively the investors that are coming along to it, whether they're in person or online, have had multiple touch points with the companies that we're actually featuring at the conference, and that they're going to have the opportunity to engage with. There's no better feeling for a company that when they turn up to an event and they basically have people coming to have conversations with them because they've seen their profile, they understand a bit about the business, and now they want to have a bit more of an in-depth conversation. On November 27th, we're going to be hosting the Capital Raising Masterclass, right? So that's going to be another stage. And the specific reason why we're doing it at that time, because we know that people typically use the December, January period, not just to get re-energized, refreshed, etc., but also often they use that for strategic components as far as when it comes to capital-related activities. January 29th, we'll be hosting the Life Science Investor Education and also online showcase, which is a bit of a prelude to what's going to be happening at Emergence. And then on February 18th, we're going to be hosting Emergence 2026. And that's when the real fun begins. So, I said we'll have anywhere between 500 to 750 investors. You saw what this year's event looked like. So if you're interested in participating in the package and in this partnership opportunity, the next step is to actually just scan the QR code. So you basically just get your camera. You can literally just basically take a photo of this and effectively scan it. It will take you to a registration of interest form, right? With that registration of interest form, when you complete that, we'll then send you an invite to basically have a bit of an introductory discussion, whether it be with myself or the MTPConnect team. And from there, obviously, we'll have a conversation about the event, go through any questions that you have, and then or any more information that you may need, etc., and we can discuss that. So effectively, if you're interested in participating, as mentioned, we only have got spaces for 20 companies on the day to actually participate. So just scan that QR code, fill in the form, and then basically send that through. So now, whilst everyone's doing that, what I'm going to do is if you want to ask any questions, feel free to send through questions in the chat. I've only got the chat open just because my screen's taking it up. So feel free to send through your questions in the chat box. So the question is can a US medtech startup participate? Yes, they can. So we've worked with Israeli life science companies, UK life science companies, Singapore life science companies, etc. So one of the questions is around how do we curate opportunities. So typically our curation process, there's a bit of a science to this, and effectively what we're looking for is the things which are going to be relevant to investors. So effectively when we're curating companies, right, if you're interested in participating, we'd love you to register your interest, and if we don't think it's relevant, we'll obviously let you know. But our curation part is effectively looking for teams that have been there, done that experience. If you have raised capital previously, that is ideal, because effectively when companies have already raised some capital previously, it basically shows to other investors that someone's been through the business or been through the IP, or is basically backing you as a founder, and they've put money in. Likewise, other areas of interest, if you've got trials with, hospitals, universities, any types of partnerships which are sort of recognizable, effectively they're social proof elements that we're looking for as part of it. And also, if you've been able to access grants or receive grants, we know that in going through that grant process, there would have been a diligence done on the IP associated with your company, with your technology, etc. If you're in market, then effectively what we're looking for is some sort of growth metrics that we can actually communicate to. Now, the reason for that curation is not because I'm a VC doing DD. It's more about when you're presenting opportunities like this at an event, it's more investors, in getting an outcome, investors have to look for things which make sense, things which their brain can identify with. It's going back to that unknown to known. So if you've already raised investment, or if you've actually put in a significant amount of capital into the business yourself personally, which we're seeing a lot more of, that's also ideal. Okay, someone's asking about attending Emergence. That's not for this conversation. So if you want to attend Emergence, you can just go and register when we actually launch the site. Any other questions? All right, so I'll just leave this up here for now. So effectively, if you've got any other questions there, feel free to write it down. Any questions which popped into your mind. As I said, this is not, this is not a VC due diligence. This is effectively, if you're interested in participating, if you'd like to showcase what you're doing at Emergence 2026 and be a part of the program that we're working on together, I said, scan the QR code, fill in the registration form. I said, either myself or MTPConnect will have a chat with you. We'll be happy to go through your questions and so forth as part of it. I said, this is something that I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. So I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to partner with MTPConnect to be able to actually do this. And I know if you would have seen some of the names of the life science companies that we've worked with beforehand. Typically, we've tried to do sessions together where we've had like 6 companies in one or something like that. So we tried to sort of bring them together, but doing an entire day is something that, to place a spotlight on the life science ecosystem in one day is super exciting. So on the reason, as I mentioned, the reason why that's limited to the 20 spots is just because of the timing of the event and the spaces that we'll have available for that. So that's why for the limit of the 20. So someone's asked said, as I mentioned, we don't charge any other fees. It is just the flat subscription. So can you get a copy of the presentation? Yes, we're going to send through a copy of the recording for this as well. And then also we'll provide a link to the presentation as part of that. Welcome back, Lisa.
Hello. Great job, Steve.
Thank you.
I was going to say, if there doesn't seem to be any more questions, I might just thank you so much for putting this together, and just let everyone know that we will be following up with an email with all the details that have been shared today after this as well.
Great. And I'll just put up as well, just for anyone, if you want to, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. And this is also my email address from a contact details perspective. All right, so from here, I said, Lisa, you're going to send out an email. We'll obviously send out an email with so basically the video for this is going to be produced straight away. So we'll aim to send that out to everyone tomorrow. Ideally, we'd love to have conversations with everyone over the next couple of weeks. So just make sure you fill out complete the registration of interest, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks, Todd. All right, everyone, have a good evening. We appreciate your time, and we've finished half an hour early. That is absolutely a rarity for any presentation I do.
Perfect on a sunny day like today.
I completely agree. Thanks,
Bye,
Lisa.
everyone.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and hopefully we'll see you at Emergence.